Hey there, Ira Flato back again with Michio Kaku. That was a great little introduction.
Yeah, after watching that video, I can't wait to hear the speaker myself.
Well, after, it's been a morning of sort of doom and gloom between Margaret Atwood and the general and what's going to happen to us, what threats that we face. Give us something hopeful about the future that you work on.
Well, science is the engine of prosperity. Take a look at the Industrial Revolution, which was unleashed when we physicists worked out the laws of thermodynamics. Steam engines, which came after that, and then locomotives and factories. Then we worked out electricity and magnetism, which unleashed the electric age. More recently, we worked out the quantum mechanics of transistors and lasers, and that gave us the internet and high technology. And now we're entering the fourth great era of scientific investigation, prosperity, wealth generation. Physics at the molecular level. Artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, and biotechnology are just going to blow the lid right off.
Which one do you like first, the best? Which one are you looking forward to the most of those three?
Well, I agree with Mark Zuckerberg that artificial intelligence is going to create jobs, new industries. It's going to revolutionize the way we deal with products. It's going to make life easier, more beneficial, and so on and so forth. But in the long term, as was mentioned, we have to be careful. Like when we harness fire, when we harness the power of airplanes. Airplanes could be used to deliver mail. Airplanes can also be used to deliver bombs. I think by the end of this century, we have to be careful. By the end of this century, when robots become self-aware, that's when we put a chip in their brain to shut them off if they have murderous thoughts.
Well, someone you called the rock star of science, Stephen Hawking, posthumously released a book of essays last week called Brief Answers to Big Questions. And he talks about, humanity entering what he calls a self-design evolution. And he also warns about the possibility that, we've talked about this a bit here, that AI robots could take us over. Does that not concern you, those sorts of issues?
It does, but I think by the end of the century, once robots become self-aware. See, robots today do not know they're robots. You talked about robots, they're clueless.
Isn't that a good thing?
It's a good thing that they don't know what they are. But by the end of the century, I think they will have the intelligence of a monkey, for example. Monkeys are self-aware. Now, dogs, on the other hand, dogs are confused. Dogs think that we are the top dog, and they're the underdog. Monkeys are very clear about the fact that they are not human. And once our robots become as intelligent as a monkey, we should have fail-safe mechanisms to shut them off, to regulate them, because they could turn on us. We do not want to create our evolutionary successor.
I hate when that happens. You've been fascinated by Einstein. I have actually my Einstein socks on today because I knew I was going to talk to you about this. And Einstein, for the last, 30 years of his life, attempted to solve the unified field theory of everything, how everything works. You're still working on that. What do you think? What do you think you can accomplish that he didn't accomplish?
Well, first of all, it all started when I was 8 years old. When I was 8 years old, my life changed completely because everyone was talking about the fact that a great scientist had died. And the picture they published of his desk changed my world. The caption said, "This is a picture of the unfinished manuscript of the greatest scientist of our time." I was floored. I said, "What? Why couldn't he finish it? It's a homework problem, right? Yeah. Why couldn't he talk to his mother? Why couldn't he solve this problem?" I went to the library. I found out the man was Albert Einstein, and the unfinished work was the theory of everything. An equation perhaps no more than 1 inch long that would allow us to, quote, read the mind of God. So I said to myself, whoa, that's what I want to work on for the rest of my life. And today, we actually think we have it. It's not in its final form. It's very difficult to test, but we actually think we have the theory of everything. And it's called string theory. If you watch CBS and you watch The Big Bang Theory, you know that that's what Sheldon works on, string theory. Right. It's got to be true.
I was on The Big Bang Theory 3 times, so I understand what he was working on. But let me push back a little on that. And science says if you have an idea and you can't gather the evidence to prove it, and it's now, over 30 years, string theory is over 30 years old, and as you say, it's hard to do those experiments, don't you have to give up on that idea after a while? It becomes a religion, not a scientific principle.
Well, there's a quote from Thomas Edison. He said, what is failure? Failure is getting right to the very edge of success and then quitting. That is the definition of failure. Now, the next big step is to create an atom smasher which can actually test the theory directly. The Large Hadron Collider is just at the border, we think, of being able to create dark matter, which we think is a higher octave of the string. We are the lowest octave of a vibrating string. The next octave up, we think, is going to be dark matter, which we hope to create with the Large Hadron Collider.
Wow.
Not guaranteed,
wow.
But if we do, that could clinch the whole thing.
Now let's talk about that, because that's one of my favorite subjects. If you listen to Science Friday, you always know I'm trying to sneak in the dark side here. That the most amazing part about the universe now is everything that we can see in visible light is only 4% of what the universe is made out of. The rest, 96%, is dark energy and dark matter. And here we are in the 21st century, and we have no idea what that stuff is.
Yep, that's embarrassing. Realize that every high school textbook is now being rewritten. Every high school textbook says the universe is mainly made out of atoms.
Right.
Wrong. As you mentioned, 96% is made out of dark matter, dark energy, which are invisible. If I held dark matter in my hand right now, it would actually drift right through my fingers, go right through the floor, penetrate the floor, go right to the core of the earth, go to China, reverse direction in China, and then come back all the way to my hand.
But it's here everywhere. But it should be, in other words, we don't see it. It is actually in your hand as we speak.
We think it's in outer space. That's why we have the Hubble Space Telescope giving us maps. We have maps now of this invisible matter in outer space. And how do you photograph invisible matter? Well, take a look at your glasses. How do you know that there's glass inside your glasses? Because light bends when it goes to your glass. Bingo, you now know there's glass inside your glasses, though glass is invisible. Same thing with the Hubble Space Telescope. By looking at the bending of starlight through galaxies, we can prove the existence of invisible matter. And then to make matters worse, there's something called dark energy, which makes up 73% of the universe, and that is blowing the universe apart. That's how the universe will eventually die, we think, because of the rapid expansion due to dark energy, which is repulsive.
So it's like an anti-gravity thing.
It's like an anti-gravity thing, right?
It's pushing, and we only discovered this a few years ago, right? Dark energy.
That's right. If you want to win a Nobel Prize, if you want to win a Nobel Prize in physics, find out what dark matter is, find out what dark energy is, and tell me first. We'll share the Nobel Prize, okay?
Tell yourself first if you want to win it, and tell him second. Let's talk about the multiverse. So you saw in a little video that string theory would predict that there are multi-universes around us?
That's right.
Evidence? Tell us what that means.
Well, Stephen Hawking, in his latest book, says God, bah, humbug. He can prove the non-existence of God because there was no time for God to create the universe at the instant of the Big Bang. He says time started with the Big Bang, therefore there was no time for God to create a universe, i.e. there's no God. I think there's a flaw in that argument because Einstein's theory of gravity breaks down at the instant of the Big Bang. That's why he spent 30 years of his life chasing after a higher theory. And what does string theory say? Well, Einstein says the universe is a bubble. We live on the skin of the bubble, and the bubble's expanding. That's called the Big Bang theory. String theory says there are other bubbles out there. There's a bubble bath of universes, and universes are being formed all the time. Big bangs are happening even as we speak. So we have this bubble bath of universes.
Right.
So there was something before Genesis, chapter 1, verse 1. There was something before the Big Bang. And we're going to detect gravity waves from the instant of creation with gravity wave detectors in outer space one day. We should find evidence, we should find baby pictures of the instant of the Big Bang, and maybe we'll find evidence of an umbilical cord. An umbilical cord connecting our baby universe to a parent universe.
So our universe is just one bubble in a lot of different, like a foam of bubbles.
That's right.
Okay? We're just one of those bubbles.
That's right. And for me, that's good because, you see, I was raised as a Buddhist, and in Buddhism, there's no such thing as God. There's only nirvana, timelessness. But my parents wanted me to be as American as possible because they were in a concentration camp during World War II. So they sent me to Presbyterian Sunday school, where I learned all about Genesis and all about the parables. So I've had these two conflicting ideas in my head for years, but now we can meld them together into a single theory. Our universe had a genesis. Our universe had a Big Bang. There was an explosion, but these explosions take place all the time. Universes keep budding off other universes. And what is the universe expanding into? Expanding into another bigger arena, the arena of 11-dimensional hyperspace. Therefore, our bubble is expanding in nirvana. And so here we have a beautiful melding of Buddhism with the Presbyterian religion.
It's a Nirvana moment. It's, I hadn't thought about that. Where do you get your ideas from? I mean, this is I've talked to a lot of physicists over the years. I never heard this kind of take on that. I mean, do you take a shower and think about these things while the water is coming down? Do you drive or?
Yeah, well, you know, if you're a physicist working on the creation of the universe, where the universe came from, all these cosmological questions, right? It forces you to ask yourself questions that the average person doesn't think about.
Right.
Is there a universe beyond time? Are there two times? Can time be double times? And in string theory, yes. In string theory, we have double time universes, where universes can have two clocks whenever you measure an event, and where there was a time before time, and that is, of course, as I mentioned, the time before the universe collided with another universe, giving birth to our baby universe. So string theory forces you to think about hyperspace, higher dimensions, time travel. That's what string theory forces you to think about. So for me, a wormhole is not something you see on Star Trek. A wormhole, to me, is something that could actually exist in outer space, and one day we might be able to create one and manipulate one to go backwards in time to meet your teenage mother before you're born. And when that happens, you're in big trouble.
Should find out what I did with those comic books. Your current book, The Future of Humanity, talks about a disaster that might overtake the Earth, and we have to leave the Earth and go some other place. Is Mars an option to go?
Yeah, well, as you saw in the video, the dinosaurs did not have a space program. That's why they're not here today. They're not here to argue the fact because they didn't have a space program. And if you dig right beneath your feet right now, drill right into the soil here, you'll pick up fossils of extinct life forms, 99.9% of which go extinct. Extinction is the norm for Mother Nature. We think of Mother Nature being warm and cuddly and cute. Yes, Mother Nature is that too. But Mother Nature can also have supervolcanoes and cosmic collisions, and that's what happened to the dinosaurs. So we need an insurance policy. We need Plan B. Just in case something bad happens to the planet Earth, we need to become at least a two-planet species.
Yeah, Stephen Hawking other physicists have talked about that also, but it's an incredibly expensive and long-term project, right?
It's long-term, but prices are dropping. You know, how many people here have seen the movie The Martian?
Shoppers,
how many people here have seen the movie The Martian with Matt Damon? That movie cost $100 million, but the Indian government sent a probe past Mars for $70 million. So a Hollywood movie about going to Mars costs more than actually going to Mars.
Well, it's like anybody who shopped for real estate, it's one thing to find the empty lot, and I can buy the property or land it, but then it's another thing to build a colony or a habitat, and that would be pretty expensive also.
Yeah, however, we could so-called use the terrain. For example, ice can be mined for drinking purposes. Oxygen, hydrogen could be used for breathing and rocket fuel just from the ice. There are lava tubes where you can dig into the soil with a tube already there waiting for you to create the first Mars port. And crops, genetically modified algae, can thrive because the atmosphere is carbon dioxide. And so we might be able to create an agriculture for a self-perpetuating colony on Mars. And then longer term, we have to melt the polar ice caps. That would require solar satellites beaming sun's energy to the polar ice caps so that water flows freely on the surface of Mars for the first time in 3 billion years.
Do you think that some government is going to get there first, or some private entity, Elon Musk, somebody like that?
I think there's a good chance that private enterprise will get there first. In fact, they asked Elon Musk, would you go into a rocket, your own rocket ship, to go to Mars? And he said yes, but not on impact. And so I think, yeah, I think a lot of us would go to Mars if it's safe and if there's no danger of an impact.
But there are people who have said that a trip to Mars is a one-way trip, that no one's going to be coming back due to radiation sickness they might get on the way over, or just that it's so dangerous. And there are a lot of volunteers who said, I would do that. Thousands of people said I would do that.
Yeah, but I think that's an example of fake news. When we scientists proposed the one-way ticket to Mars, that's not the whole truth. First, we send an unmanned probe to Mars with robots that then collect the ice, melt it to create rocket fuel. So you have an automatic rocket that creates rocket fuel on its own.
Right.
Second, the astronauts come on a one-way ticket. They use the rocket fuel that was created by the first ship to refuel the second ship, and then there's plenty of rocket fuel. That's the one-way ticket. It's actually not the way the media presented it, because they sell more newspapers that way to make it sound terrific.
Well, that's what we're here for, is can do away with fake news. There are a couple of microphones available if you want to ask Michio a question about future, what's happening in the future. You have talked about how you have a front row seat to the future because you've interviewed every top scientist in the world.
I've interviewed over 300 of the world's top scientists for the Discovery Channel, the Science Channel, my own national radio program. And every time I interview these people, I ask them the fundamental question, the key question. I ask them, is there intelligent life on the Earth? Well, I was watching the Kardashians on TV last night, and I've concluded that there's no intelligent life on this planet. Sorry about that. Another planet maybe, but not this one.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about all the discovery of these exoplanets, planets that are way out there, and even one that we discovered that was only 40 light years away?
That's a game changer. 4,000 planets have been discovered. In fact, tonight, when you look in the night sky, you'll see the Milky Way galaxy in a way that I cannot see in New York. Spectacular. And on average, every single star, I repeat, on average, every single star has a planet going around it. That is astounding. When I was a kid, we used to dream about what's happening out there. Now we realize that there, all throughout the night sky, there are planets. Perhaps just like the Earth.
Unfortunately, it's full moon tonight. You're not going to see the Milky Way. But, yeah, so unfortunate. What about science education? I know you like to talk about the problems we have in teaching kids or keeping them interested in science. I mean, don't kids start out as natural scientists? They're doing little experiments. The parents get upset. Back in the day when I was a kid, you tried to put a Pop-Tart in a VCR and you got slapped for doing that. It looks like it should fit in there, right?
We are born scientists. We want to know why the sun shines. We want to know where we came from. And then around 10, that's the magic year. Whenever I interview these Nobel Prize winners, that's the magic year when something happens. They have this epiphany, this existential shock, reading an astronomy book, going to the planetarium, getting a telescope. Then, after that, then they hit the greatest destroyer of scientists known to science. It destroys millions of scientists, and that is junior high school.
They discover the opposite sex in junior high school.
Science is made into memorization. You have to memorize the parts of a flower. Science is made boring. You're taught by the gym teacher who can't answer your questions anyway. So our students scored dead last, almost consistently for 20 years in every UN test taken of people overseas.
Wow, wow. Yes?
Yeah, you mentioned something about wormholes and time travel, and I wanted to know what your thoughts were on time travel, and if you believe in time travel, do you believe in chaos theory and how that would impact time travel?
Well, first of all, the first time travel solution was introduced in 1949 by Einstein's roommate, Kurt Gödel, the greatest mathematician of the last 1,000 years. And he found that if the universe rotated, and you rotated around the universe, you could come back yesterday. You could come back before you left. So scientists were immediately paralyzed by this fact. They were looking for rotating universes. Now, I should tell you right now, the universe does not rotate. It expands. It's called the Big Bang Theory. But if it did rotate, then perhaps time travel would be commonplace. Then since then, we have discovered hundreds of solutions of Einstein's equations which allow for time travel. So what's the catch? There's two catches. First catch is you need the energy of a black hole to open up the gateway. You need positive energy like the looking glass of Alice. The looking glass of Alice is the wormhole, connecting Oxford to the countryside of Alice. Second, you need negative energy to stabilize it. Like on Star Trek, they bump into wormholes all the time, but the first thing they ask is, how stable is that wormhole? These two things are the killers. Now, we, as a primitive civilization, cannot play with black holes, and we cannot play with negative matter. But that means that a civilization far more advanced than us may, just may, have the capability of bending time into a pretzel. But it's not for us. And Stephen Hawking, in his latest book, which just came out last week, changed his mind and said, yes, time travel probably is possible, but you have to have those two basic ingredients: positive energy to open the gateway, negative energy to stabilize it.
You said something very important in passing, and just in the few minutes we have left, I don't want to miss out what you said. And you talked about growing up very poor, and your parents who were in a Japanese internment camp, and your life history is pretty incredible. How do you go from being in an internment camp to being motivated to study physics and become a futurist like that?
Well, I became a physicist because I was enamored of this idea of trying to complete Einstein's dream.
I know, but what was it about your parents that motivated you to do that?
Right. But see, my parents didn't have a grievance. They just said, look, you learn from your mistakes, you pick up the pieces, and you move on. And for me, I realized that, hey, this was a really great opportunity to become part of the cutting edge of science. Sputnik had just gone up. All of a sudden, we had the Sputnik generation. All of a sudden, it was your patriotic duty to become a physicist or a chemist or an astronomer or an astronaut. There were magazine articles written about the glories of science for the first time. And so I said to myself, well, look, that's one way to be part of the cutting edge, to be part of this great endeavor to understand the secrets of nature.
Is there anything equivalent now? Because I was a child of that era with Sputnik and going to school and studying engineering. Is there any equivalent event or time going on now that could spur people to say, hey, I want to go study science?
Well, President Barack Obama talked about the Sputnik Moment, to recreate the Sputnik Moment. That's a little bit difficult because he, of course, partially canceled Sputnik, and he canceled the space shuttle. However, the space shuttle is up and running, and we hope to launch it next year. In fact, to go around the moon, the SLS booster rocket will have an unmanned test probably in December of 2019 as it goes around the moon. So there could be renewed interest in this. But I think it's the educational program in America that has to be revamped. We have a great educational program that trains young people to live in 1950. The only problem is we don't live in 1950 anymore. But our educational system is frozen, and we have to revamp it for the modern age. I teach physics to pre-med sometimes, and I have to teach physics of tuning forks, levers, and pulleys.
That's high school subject.
Yeah, and meanwhile, when they become a doctor, they're going to use MRI machines, they're going to use CAT scans, they're going to use radioisotopes, and there I am teaching friction and the pulleys to incoming medical students.
It's crazy.
And I say, this is crazy. The book is 300 years too late. We're way past pulleys. And we don't teach them what they have to know about the modern day era. We don't teach them about what's inside a cell phone.
Because we don't teach them how to appreciate science. We teach music appreciation. We might teach art appreciation. We don't expect people to be Picasso or Yo-Yo Ma. But we never teach students why science is important, why they should know about it, who the great giants of science were, how science even works,
right.
How failure is very big in science, and how failure in science is more times than success. But who remembers the failures in life? We don't teach how important that is.
Right. We should teach them that science is the engine of prosperity. All the wealth that we see around you is a byproduct of science. Physicists invented the transistor and the laser. That's why we're here today. That's why Google exists, because we physicists invented the transistor. And we also invented television, and that's why we have TV people here. We invented radio, microwaves, radar. We created the space program. But the average kid doesn't know that.
Yeah.
The average kid thinks that, well, to be very frank, a lot of people call me on radio and say that it's the aliens from outer space. They gave us the microchip that we reverse engineered. Well, I tell them the next time you're kidnapped by a UFO, steal something. I don't care what it is. An alien chip, an alien hammer, steal something. There's no law against stealing from an extraterrestrial. No law whatsoever. So you have bragging rights. You can prove once and for all that intelligent life exists on the Earth.
Let me see if I can get a last question in here. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Hi. So the search for intelligent life in outer space, how do you see that playing out? When do you see it playing out? What do you see there? I'd love to hear you speak more about that.
Well, I'll stick my neck out. I think that sometime in this century, we will make contact with another civilization in outer space. But we have to throw away all the prejudices that we have. For example, we think they're going to have UFOs and land on the White House lawn. No, I personally believe that alien civilization will digitize their mind, and they become digitally immortal, and they're going to shoot their consciousness on laser beams throughout the universe at the speed of light. I call this laser porting. Forget UFOs and accidents and radiation and weightlessness. Forget all that. You can digitize yourself. Put the knowledge of your consciousness on a laser beam, shoot it to the moon. You're in 1 second, you're on the moon. 20 minutes, you're on Mars. 4 years, you're on the nearest star, traveling at the speed of light. None of this 20th century flying saucer stuff. So I think, yeah, I think they're out there.
You think like Star Trek type transport is possible?
Well, I think that if we digitize ourselves and we put ourselves on a laser beam, we can travel at the speed of light. And at the other end, there'll be mainframe that then downloads our consciousness and puts us into an avatar that is perfectly formed, superhuman powers, is handsome, is pretty, is whatever you want to be. And you can walk on the moon. You can walk on Mars and explore the solar system in an afternoon at the speed of light.
Wow.
In the morning, you have breakfast in New York. At noontime, you have lunch on Mars. And then you go to the asteroid belt at the evening and come back for the same night, traveling at the speed of light.
Dr. Michio Kaku, thank you very much for taking time to be with us today.